Also, I should mention there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so if you haven't watched Arcane yet, hopefully you would have because the show has been out for a couple months, I think, by now. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so please note and be aware. Anyway. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Everest Radley, author of Unhuman, and today we are going to be reviewing Arcane. So I've kind of hinted at this, especially in my last video, which I talked about why Arcane isn't dystopian. I really recommend that you watch that. It's totally off topic from what we're going to be talking about today, but it's important to me as an author, especially a dystopian author, because it talks about, you know, what is dystopian, where's the genre going in general. So if you would please be so kind to watch that, that would be amazing. Thank you. But yeah, today we're going to be reviewing Arcane, and many of you may already know this, but I have some strong opinions about this, I guess you could say. So this is going to be a wild review. I should also mention that I'm not going to be reviewing everything for this in this video, and I probably will not come back to this later. I'll explain more later, but first of all, before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe and that like. Leave a comment as you're watching the video about what you thought about Arcane. I know that it seems like the whole world has already watched this, and many people really like it. I came into it expecting to like it as well, but yeah. So if you would be so kind, that'd be great. Also, check out those links in the description below. That's where I put to my book, my first free chapter, my author website, all those goodies. So please check out those. But yeah, let's just get right into it. So before I start, I want to mention my 3 rules that I have for reviewing. So first, also, if I look like I'm looking down a lot, it's because this review is going to take a really long time. So I've basically created an outline and then written in all my thoughts for it. So first, I really like to go in blind whenever I'm trying to review something, simply because I believe firmly that it doesn't matter what position you come from or what knowledge or education you have, you should be able to come in to something and still be able to get something out of it. So I went into Arcane knowing the only thing that I knew is that Jinx was a character and that it was from League of Legends. But I mean, League of Legends has been around for how long? So that stuff is really unavoidable. There was nothing I could do about that. So that's all I knew going into the series. My next rule is how I rate things in general, and that is my 1 to 10 system. So if you've seen a review from me before, this may be a little bit redundant, but typically when I go in and I review, I have a 1 to 10 system, and I expect whatever I'm watching or reading to land at least a number 5. I figure that regardless of what you're reading or what you're watching, there should at least be some good things about it that puts it right in the middle. So my number 5 is actually where I start off at, and I either add or subtract according to how I'm feeling as I'm watching the show. And lastly, I have a 60% rule for finishing or DNFing the series. And I'm just going to come out and say this right now. I actually got to the 60% point in Arcane, and I was 100% sure that I was never going to finish the show. Like, I actually had a 2-week gap where I didn't watch anything from episode 5 to anything else, simply because I was like thoroughly convinced I'm never going to watch the show again. I don't like it. It's not for me. But in the end, I read something online about Victor becoming a villain. So I was like, oh, if Victor, this character that I really like, I actually really liked Victor in Arcane, if he becomes a villain, and I really love villains, like, that would be great. I really want to see that. So literally the only thing that could have attracted me back to Arcane did, and I finished out the whole series. I don't think I would have finished it out otherwise. I really was at that 60% mark and I was burned out. I had no other interest in it. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But yeah, those are my 3 rules. for how I do things. So let's just get on to the plot and everything else that comes with it. So if you've never watched Arcane before, I would say it's simple. So it's about basically two sisters. They're going out on a thieving adventure where they're trying to steal something and make a lot of money off of it. But what they don't know is that they're actually stealing from a young inventor who is working to create what is called hex tech. It's magic incorporated with your average technology from this universe. So these girls, they go in, they rob the place with their two brothers, and then after they're done robbing it, they escape. But in the process of escaping, they've drawn a lot of attention. So they escape, but now they're kind of in trouble because, first of all, one, on their way back, they lost all of their loot, and two, they've just drawn a bunch of trouble, or they've just drawn a bunch of attention from all of the essentially police officers. They're called enforcers, the police officers that are running the city. And they come down and they come to Zon, which is sort of like the lower class. So there's Piltover and then there's Zon. Piltover is where all the fancy rich people live and where they had gone to steal from. Zon is like the poor lower class part of the city. And so these enforcers come to Zon and they're looking for these girls and their brothers. And they come to a guy named Vander. Vander's in charge of everything that goes on in Zon. He's like the unofficial leader for what happens in Zon. And they're basically like, here, we're looking for these criminals and we think you know who they are. And Vander's like, I can't give them to you. Which, by the way, why would you say that? If I were Vander, I would have just been like, you want to know what? I don't know who they are yet, but I'm going to look around and once I find them, I will hand them right over to you. Like the idea of just saying, well, I know who they are, but I'm not going to hand them over to you is like it's the worst way to go about this. It's absolutely horrible, but ignoring that, Vander continues to protect these girls and these children because they're actually his children. He adopted them. Vander doesn't agree with what they've done, but it's already too late to go back and change everything. They've already drawn attention as it is, and they're already looking for people to blame. So Vander decides, enforcers are going to go nuts. They're going to kill everyone. They're going to change everything. Like, I'm just going to hand myself over. And Vi, one of these girls, is like, no, I'm going to hand myself over. I'm going to do the right thing. Like, she's the older of the two. So she's like, I'm going to hand myself over. I'm going to do everything. I know I'm the leader and I know that I encouraged all of this, so it's only right for me to do so. But before any of this happens, everyone basically dies. So episode 3 is where everyone dies because in the shadows, while this was all going on, a man named Silco was planning his revenge and he was creating a drug called Shimmer. And Shimmer is this drug which is kind of like steroids on steroids. It gives people like superhuman abilities. It makes them super, super strong and super fast. And yeah, just unreasonably aggressive. So he basically uses Shimmer to kill some of the enforcers. And then he kidnaps Vander. And in the process of Vander and everyone trying to escape, they all die because the other girl, the smaller girl named Powder, Vi's little sister, tries to save them, but ends up blowing them all up instead and basically killing everyone except for Vi. Vi lives. And from that point on, everything just kind of gets crazy. Vi is still blamed for everything that goes on above ground, so she gets arrested and she gets thrown in prison. Powder gets adopted by Silco, thinking that she had been abandoned by her older sister, Vi. And Silco's like, you're not gonna be Powder anymore. You're now Jinx. Like, this is this whole thing, where they take her nickname, which is previously Jinx, because she messed things up all the time and like she could never get anything right. She was a Jinx, and so he renamed her. You're Jinx now. You're my daughter, and he basically raises her. And 10 years pass. So now at the middle point of the series, this is about where I left off. Powder now turned Jinx is helping Silco with his evil organization. They're releasing Shimmer into the streets and into all over Zon and all over, and they're trying to export it as well. There's a moment where there's an attack, and Jinx ends up losing it momentarily, and she ends up killing a bunch of people. And so to prove herself worth, she decides, I'm going to go do something entirely crazy. I'm going to steal this weapon from Piltover. I'm going to steal it from these rich fancy people, and I'm going to show them what I can do. Which of course just makes things worse, because it's like you're rewatching and you're reliving everything that happened 10 years ago when Vi encouraged them to steal something from Piltover, and everything kind of just broke loose. So, but now it's like super worse, because previously those were just trinkets. This is an actual potential source for a deadly weapon. So everything just kind of spirals out of control. You get this other half of the story where you see the inventor that they had stolen from years ago, he now becomes a counselor. He's the head of this mega corporation where they run technology. He falls in love with one of the other counselors. They're trying to decide what to do with Zahn, with these other people. He's the one that also gets stolen from, again, ironically. You'd think he'd learn to start securing his stuff, but apparently not. And everything kind of comes to a head with, they're either deciding we need to go to war and get our material and our supplies back, or we need to allow Zahn to become its own independent nation. Because that's what Silco had been aiming for this whole time, even though it had been kind of like a roundabout way. So he had gotten his revenge on Vander, and he had done all of that because he felt betrayed by Vander, but his ultimate goal in the end was to help Zahn become its own independent nation. And so now he had this opportunity. They were brokering a deal when Silco dies, and everything just kind of goes to crap once again, and it's mostly Jinx's fault. Or actually, I could say 90% of it was Jinx's fault, because Jinx was the one that tried to assassinate the council. I'm just going to say it like that because there's really no other way to say it. That's what we have to leave off at anyway, because it ends right before the bomb actually explodes and kills the council. So we don't know how many people actually die in this. We don't know what the true cause is, or like the extent of damage is. Like, we don't know anything about it yet. We just know that that was what Jinx did, and that's how the series ended. Also, I should mention there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so if you haven't watched Arcane yet, hopefully you would have, because the show has been out for a couple months, I think, by now. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so please note and be aware. Anyway, so that was the plot. I left off right after Jace became a counselor, and right after Jinx had stolen the crystal. At that point, I was just like not at all convinced by the story. I'm gonna make it very clear, Jace is my least favorite character out of the whole show, and I will go into thorough detail about why. But yeah, I was not having a lot of fun, and there's plenty of reasons why. But first of all, we should talk about the good things, because the bad things we're gonna be here for a while. So the good things. What did I like about this show? First of all, I liked the parallels. There were tons and tons of parallels all over the show. For example, Vi being raised by Vander, who was not actually her father, who adopted her, and who looked like this really gruesome, beastly fellow. And then he actually turned out to be very soft and kind. And then the same sort of thing with Silco, where Powder was adopted by Silco, and even though he was like this murderer, we all saw him to be like this super bad guy, he ended up turning out to be like a pretty decent father figure. So I like that parallel. I like how the exact same problem like started off the beginning of this. The exact same problem that started off the series is also the exact same problem that kind of continued the series. I liked those parallels. There's a bunch of little ones in there, especially between Jace and Victor. There's a big one that I will get into. But yeah, there's parallels all throughout the show, and I love parallels. I love writing in parallels. If you read Unhuman, you'll see tons of parallels as well, especially as we get further into the series. But love parallels. They were good. Another thing that I think everyone will mention in any of their reviews is the animation. The animation was literally top tier. I don't think many TV shows or companies can hold a candle to how good that animation was. The fact that they made all of their characters look very distinct and unique, and that they were able to incorporate like a variety of elements, of skin tones, of like settings and surroundings, and also different styles as well. Because as you're watching the show, you notice that whenever Jinx comes on screen, there tends to be a little bit of a different style, or I shouldn't say a little bit. It's super apparent. But yeah, animation was amazing. I loved the animation. Voice acting was also really good. I don't think there was ever a point in the show where I was like, I feel like I'm watching an animated series. I really, really liked the voice acting. They did phenomenal, but that's the kind of stuff that you can expect coming out of a project that has two massive companies. You know, it has Netflix behind it and it has League of Legends. So it doesn't surprise me that, you know, we're having this really phenomenal acting in these animations. Yeah, top tier. I also really liked the relationship between Vander and Vi. That was actually the first 3 episodes of the show are what I feel like are the strongest part of the show. I do like some parts about Jinx character later. I think that she's a really unique character, and it becomes really obvious that pretty much the whole show has been dedicated to her. But yeah, I really liked Vi and Vander's relationship. It reminds me a lot of my relationship with my dad, because he's a very he's a very tough guy. Not like physically tough, like I'm gonna punch you in the face, but like he's just like a really emotionally strong, dependable guy. So I really like that because I could see myself in that. And I see a lot of reasons why people would be really emotionally drawn to the series, especially if they have conflicted sister relationships themselves, or other sibling relationships. But yeah, the overall animation, character design, all of the like technical aspects of that were really good. Vander and Vi were really good. I also really, really liked a lot of the fight scenes. I like how they didn't pull their punches, pun intended, in the fight scenes, because fighting is dirty and it gets ugly and people die and it's rough. Furthermore, all the fight scenes didn't last super, super long, so they weren't just graceful, like, here, I'm gonna do this dancing motion and you're gonna somehow block it. Like, I like how they were very realistic with what a fight scene would actually look like in this world, and I appreciated that a lot. That being said, that is actually about where I end with my list of good things, because I really, really liked those elements, but they're more overwhelming, incomplete, or bad elements than there are good ones. So we're just going to get into it. I have a literal 10-page document here of notes, and thankfully I'm not going to let myself ramble and get sidetracked a lot, so we're just going to zoom through it. But yeah, I've got a lot to say, and I'm going to try to keep this video within at least an hour. Hopefully. We will see. I'm going to try my best, because I don't want these reviews to be super, super long. As entertaining as that would be, to be able to have like a 3-hour long review, it's too much, even for me. Like, I'm somebody who goes out and watches really, really long reviews, but that's way too much. So, before we get started though, I need to talk about the 4 categories that I'm going to be discussing, because I'm only going to be talking about 4. If I were here talking about anything else, we'd be here forever. So here are the things that I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about characters and their relationships. I'm going to be talking about the setting, all the plot holes that I saw, or that I noticed my first time watching through. First time as in my only time. And lastly, the ending. The ending gets its own part because it needs it. So here we go. And also keep in mind, I'm not going to be discussing all of the side characters. So for example, even though Vander and Silco played a very big part in the TV show. I'm not going to be discussing them because if I discussed every single like minor major character, we'd still be here all night long. So only major characters and only major events are getting put in this video. If you don't like that, go find a different review, I guess. I don't know. Honestly, like I said, we'd be here all night otherwise. So first we're going to talk about Jinx. So as I said, Jinx is like the main character that this show is about. She's the one that's on all of the posters and everything. I'm just going to read off what I've written because that will probably be the easiest way. So while Jinx is an interesting character, her little about her psychology makes sense. She has manic moments where she seems completely oblivious to others and appears to be in an extremely good mood, but then she also has moments where she appears to be schizophrenic, hearing voices and seeing things that aren't really there. But then again, when we look at those schizophrenic moments, they're all about her dead family. She's hearing and seeing them again, which makes you inclined to believe that it's PTSD, but it doesn't follow the traditional PTSD or even CPTSD because she's not reliving those moments or re-experiencing trauma or imagining trauma. She's actually interacting with real hallucinations that she's seeing and that she's hearing. And furthermore, we can't claim that this is just because she's been drugged, which would actually be the most logical explanation. Because in the TV show, we actually see the point when Jinx gets drugged, and it's in like the last 3 episodes. So she's having all of these breakdown moments without even being exposed to anything. So literally nothing about her psychology makes sense. It's like somebody took a bunch of mental disorders and they took traits out of them that they themselves liked and thought they were interesting, and then they just kind of stuck them all together and like put them all in a ball, and then we're like, here's Jinx's character. And another thing that I find really odd about Jinx's character is how she is basically in a vacuum. She has no connections with anyone but Silco. Like no one. Not a friend, not with anyone who is older than her, because she's surrounded by people who are older than her. Not with anybody in the streets. There's no one Jinx is close to. She literally lives in a vacuum. Now, that would be a really interesting plot point to show, to have Jinx like constantly be alone and completely alone and never engage with anyone else but Silco, because then you could point that out and be like, well, Silco's really manipulative and he's really charming and he's grooming, but ultimately, as I watched the show, I noticed that Silco is actually a pretty decent father figure to Jinx. He's not a really horrible person. So what, in that case, like, what does that make Jinx if she's just somebody who exists in a relationship vacuum? She just feels like a weapon, something to be used in a plot device, which is really thin character development and relationship to the story, in my opinion. But also another thing that I noticed is, while that'd be an interesting concept to be like, she's just this person made to be she's just a person made to be into a weapon or like a killer. That's really interesting, but ultimately it doesn't really align with what we know about her from her childhood, and that is that she was constantly surrounded with family and friends, and she had friends, and like she was a very sociable person. So it doesn't make much sense for her to be like, well, I'm never going to socialize again, or I'm never going to have any friends again, especially since she seems very extroverted. She just seems like the kind of person who happily goes up and talks to anyone because she's not afraid of social situations, or she's not afraid of being socially uncomfortable. So that doesn't make any sense to me why she would struggle or not have those relationships. Next up, we have Vi. And Vi, I found, was one of the most consistent characters in the show, but in the worst way possible. So, as I mentioned, Vi, in her plotline, after stealing stuff, she gets taken and thrown into prison. And she's there for a decade. But nothing happens. She is the exact same character before and after prison. Nothing about her has changed, which doesn't make any sense whatever. I mean, you mean to tell me that a pretty young teenage girl is thrown into a prison full of literally convicted, potentially violent criminals for a decade without ever having a fair chance or a fair trial or anything, and no permanent damage or change has come out of that. Nothing. She's the exact same person. Yeah. So, like I said, consistent for all the wrong reasons. But furthermore, the one time when she isn't consistent is like the one time she isn't consistent is when the plot needs it. And this is when the council is looking for somebody else to blame. So, like I said, those parallels. This was another parallel, one that I actually didn't like. So in the original part, you see Violet get thrown under the bus or whatever because she's the one that's blamed and she's the one that gets picked as the sacrificial lamb. Well, the council is looking for somebody to be that sacrificial lamb again, and Vi just hands over the information. So before that scene unfolds, we see Vi break out of prison. She gets free with the help of an enforcer, and during that whole process of where Vi is going to look for her sister, everything is taking place. You know, this enforcer's with her trying to gather information about Silco and his criminal activities. While all of that is taking place, Vi is vehemently protesting, saying that her sister, Powder turned Jinx, is still good and that she still has good inside of her and that she can still help her and save her and they can still be sisters. That is where Vi is for 90% of the series. Up until her and the enforcer, Caitlin, get a moment where they get to talk with the council, and Vi is suddenly like, I actually know who's been doing all this trouble. It's my sister, Jinx. Like, there you go. That's the person who's been doing all this. And it's written to look like a scene of accountability. Like, Vi is coming forward being like, it's my sister. It was my fault she turned out this way. But really what it reads as, especially if you look at it, is it looks like Vi is selling her sister out. In the moment, when her sister needs her the most, and when she needs her sister to protect her, to defend her from going to prison and experiencing all the same trauma that Vi potentially could have experienced in prison. Like, if there was any moment where all of that talk and all of that attitude of, I need to protect my sister, I need to do the best for her, really mattered, it was in that moment. And she didn't. That was it was totally inconsistent, and it was just for the plot. But what really kills me is literally 2 seconds after Vi does this, after she basically hands her sister's name over to this council, she goes right back to believing, you know, I can help my sister, I can protect her, we can run away together, we can escape, like, it's just you and me against the world. Like, literally 2 seconds, not much has changed, but at the same time, Vi just sold out her sister and, like, doesn't even really realize it or seem to care or have any self-reflection on what she's done. She just literally just gave up her sister, and it doesn't even process for her. A lot of this comes down to, and I will say this again and again, as we go through this review, a lot of this comes down to pacing. The pacing is the show's biggest flaw. A lot of people tend to market things as being fast-paced. Oh, it's exciting because it's fast-paced. Or, oh, it's enjoyable because it's fast-paced. And what this means is that TV shows and movies and books aim for being fast-paced because they think that's what will sell better and what people will like better. But what they don't realize is that it literally guts all of the character building and the world building that needs to be done in order to make something believable. So, for example, sure, you could have had Vi sell out her sister and do so with remorse and with guilt if you had given her time to have reflection moments or to really think about things or to sit by herself and actually, like, take time to think about what she was doing. The show never gives you that, though. And like, you can never really know what any of the characters are feeling in that moment. They'll animate facial expressions, but just because you show a little, like, okay, this face does not mean much. Okay? It doesn't. You can't look at me and go, "Oh wow, that explains this whole entire scene so perfectly." Like, no. You need to actually do the work that needs to be done in order to have us connect and understand and relate to these characters. So yeah, you're gonna hear me talk about this over and over and over again. The pacing in the story is literally what killed it. Because this exact thing could have easily been fixed with some slower pacing. Sure, you could have had Vi sell her sister. Sure, it would have worked. Sure, you could have had her return to believing, I'm going to believe in my sister. I'm going to fight for us. Those are things that could happen. The problem is that if you don't pace it well and you don't put in those building blocks, you're just jumping from conclusion to conclusion. So, ignoring my little pacing rant right there, moving on to one of the next characters, Mel. So Mel is the one character that I picked that I was the most excited for and the most disappointed in. She had the greatest potential out of all of the individuals in the cast, but she never ever lived up to it. She's shown as this political viper who is really cunning, but is also very wise and compassionate towards people. But you never get to see the depths of her reality or her work to get to where she is. You don't know how she got on the council. You don't. You only ever get a glimpse of what she thinks of others. She doesn't seem to have much purpose on the council or for the story other than to be the one voice on the council who gets the council to act. So it feels like she's more of a plot device. And then furthermore, like, she's a plot device beyond the council as well because she tells Jace what to do and what not to do all the time. She is the only person who ever seems to matter for, like, the plot. Like, half of her character seems to be just plot device, and then the other half actually seems to be, like, realistic, very intelligent, very creative, very smart. So it's really disappointing because, you have all of these plot device moments where she's literally existing just to further whatever is going on in that scene. But then you also have these really, like, sweet moments or, like, little tiny flashbacks or glimpses where she appears to be a very kind person, compassionate, like she tried to spare the life of someone once, or she's a painter and she's really deep and thoughtful. Like, you get these moments from her where she is an entirely fleshed out character. She just doesn't get put onto the screen in the way that her character actually makes sense, right? Like, you could have separated these two characters and had them be totally different people, and I don't think that the audience would have ever even noticed. Because really, the political side of her is entirely plot device. It exists just to move things forward and just to tell Jace, the inventor, what he should be doing. I was not a fan of that. She's the one person that I always pick for greatest character, most disappointed. And also, it kills me because later in the series, you don't even get to really see her until halfway through in the series. And then later in the series, like the last 3 episodes, all she does is she turns into Jace's love interest, which then further kills her character. Like, she was just one of the best characters who wasn't given the time of day. And that is saying a lot. Because, I mean, as I said before, this show really struggles with pacing. It's 9 episodes long, and it's got the plot line of a 30-episode TV show smashed into those 9 episodes. So every single character is on the screen fighting for time and fighting for space, and she was probably one of the best who just wasn't given any. Speaking of Jace's love interest, why don't we talk about Jace, though? So I'm just going to come out and say it. Jace is going to be in my top 5 characters that I hate of 2022. And it's only freaking January. Okay. I'm going to try not to be ranty through this section, but it may come out as ranty. So, breathe deep. Okay. So first of all, he's a horrible friend. He's a horrible son. He's a horrible love interest. And he's a horrible counselor. So let's just talk about his friendship. So he's friends with Victor and Caitlin. Victor is his partner and his fellow inventor, and Caitlin is the enforcer who's been running around with Vi, trying to fix everything and make things right in the world. With Victor, Victor comes from Zahn, and he has medical conditions, and Jace is well aware of this. He knows Victor's past, he knows his struggles, but yet he literally misses the fact that Victor is very, very sick and is literally coughing up blood and is like not at all being subtle about how weak and how sick he's feeling. And he just misses all of this. All of it. Like, they're partners who spend all of their time together, yet somehow, Jace still misses the fact that his partner is deathly ill. And on top of that, despite them being quote-unquote partners, Jace is the only person who has ever presented for their inventions. Every single time we see anything relating to their inventions, Jace is the one on all of the posters. He's the one getting up on all of the stages. He's the one accepting all of the awards and on the council and everything. He's literally the one who is accepting all of the credit, despite the fact that they are partners. Which makes this scene...
Am I interrupting?
The hell's your problem?
What's that? Another list with my name on it?
Actually, yes. But only because you signed your notes. Every page.
Even worse. Because this is the point when Victor saves Jace's life, after Jace is being a complete idiot. And I will explain that in a little bit. So the idea that, okay, we're going to commit to being partners, but I'm going to just accept all of the awards and be the face of everything while you sit in the background and quietly never get recognized for any of the work that you've ever done. Yeah, partners. On top of that, he literally starts spouting off anti-Zahn propaganda in front of Victor. Literally, he is like... There's a moment in the series where Mel, his love interest, who I just finished talking about, comes to Jace and is like, it looks like we may need to fight Zahn. I am going to ask you to weaponize your inventions to fight Zahn. And Victor's literally sitting right there and he's like, tell me you're not seriously thinking about this. Like, tell me you're not going to consider some alternative method before going and fighting my people. And Jace is literally like, I don't want to do it, but I don't know. I need to think about it. And it's like, really? Really, Jace? You know that your friend, like your best friend, according to you, and your partner is from Zahn, and you're just cool with this. You're just cool with your girlfriend being like, we should go kill your best friend's people. Like, okay, I guess that's a thing now. And then on top of that, we have Caitlin. Caitlin, who I haven't even talked about yet, but aside from just mentioning her, Jace just treats Caitlin like a love interest, right? He treats her as somebody who he can just complain to whenever he wants, and he expects her to be unconditionally by his side in everything, and then is kind of frustrated and angry when she's not. And what I mean is, like, after Jace becomes a counselor, he tries to use his powers to force Caitlin to accept a job that he is already aware that she probably doesn't want. And he is like, well, deal with it. You're just gonna have to do whatever I say. And it's like, you've been friends for how long? And you seemed romantically interested in this girl, and you're just gonna force her to do this. So, yeah, even though she was his quote-unquote friend and ally and all of this in this situation, he just treats her absolutely poorly. He treats both Victor and Caitlin very, very poorly. But is that where this all ends for Jace's character? Oh, no. we've got a lot more to go. So let's talk about him and his relationship with his mother. So Jace's father, I'm pretty sure, is dead. There's been some sort of accident or something. I don't remember. Feel free to leave in the comments what actually happened to Jace's father. But needless to say, Jace's mother is a very kind, supporting lady who helped him get into his academy and really supported him and wanted the best for him as an inventor. However, when Jace has been discovered to be exploring and experimenting illegal technology, Jace is put on trial. And in that moment, his mother decides that the best thing that I can do for him is say, he's just a silly child. He doesn't understand what he's doing. I'm going to protect him by saying, he needs to come home with me. Like, we should remove him from the academy. And that works. Jace is actually saved. He is saved from going to prison or being arrested. And he's able to go home with his mother. And at that point, what does Jace do? What does Jace do, even though he still has all of his learning that from his academy? What does he do even when he still has his friends, when he still has his support from his mother? He literally tries to go jump off a building. Keep in mind, nothing about Jace says I'm a depressed character or I'm in any way that mentally unstable. Nothing about him says that. Nothing about him says, I'm so emotionally wrecked that I have no other alternative than to do this to myself. It's literally just comes out of nowhere. I remember when I was actually watching it on screen, and it went from just being like him, it went from, this is how the scenes actually went. He was sitting with his mother. His mother's like, I know this sucks for you, and this is not what you wanted, but like, everything will still be fine. And then it jumps to him trying to go talk to his friend. He and his friend actually still getting along. And his friend being like, my mom's really upset with you right now. I can't really be friends with you at this moment, but like, you know that I'm still here for you. And like very clearly, like, no, I'm still here for you. And then him trying to do this. It comes totally out of the blue. Like, I remember watching that on the screen. I was like, holy crap, just what the heck. It was one of the most honestly frustrating things that ever happened because it made me feel like people are using extreme self-torture, essentially. They're using extreme methods of depression and of mental illness to just casually explain away some characters' feelings. Like, at no point in the TV show did I feel like Jace was really that close to it, but, it gave, this is what I'm talking about when the Jace and Victor parallel, it gave the chance for Victor to come up and to be like, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's what I mean when there's that parallel, because later in the series, Victor, who actually is legitimately struggling and actually does have real reasons to have that happen and to consider that, it gives Jace the opportunity to come in and to be the hero and be like, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. Like, but yeah, he's a trash son. Honestly. I mean, imagine saving your son's life and keeping him out of trouble and reaffirming him and helping him get back home and be safe. And then he immediately goes to turn around and be like, you want to know what? I don't care. If I can't invent things, then my life's not worth living. Like, so your mother's love doesn't matter? Your friend's love doesn't matter? The fact that you still have a shelter over your head doesn't matter? And that you're still going to do well in life doesn't matter. None of that matters, apparently, if you can't invent things. Yeah, so I was really angry with that whole thing. But again, we're not done. So this is now going back to Mel, his romantic love interest. And this was really frustrating because obviously he seems interested in Caitlin at first. He's constantly hanging out with her. He even seems to show some special interest in her. But it looks like Caitlin isn't going to return that. So literally, Mel comes out and she's the one who kisses him first. And it seems like after Mel shows him interest, suddenly he's all over her. And it's like he becomes interested in her because she's interested in him. If you're watching the series, it seems like he doesn't have any interest in her or want to spend any time with her outside of sleeping together or complaining to her. And on top of that, they're just a boring couple because Jace is a boring person and Mel is a good person, but Mel's priorities and character and everything about her gets overridden by the fact that Jace becomes the boy savior and is the person that is going to be the hero for everyone. So, I mean, when I finished the show, I honestly felt like Mel could drop dead and Jace wouldn't even care. Like, it would have impacted him as much as a change in the weather had, because that's how much interest I felt like I was getting out of Jace. But at the same time, the show was like, oh, he's kissing her and he's admiring her. And it's just like, oh my gosh. No, he honestly doesn't really seem to care about her. She seems to care more about him and his interests and what he wants than he will ever care about her, which is frustrating because, again, Mel is a queen that did not deserve any of this. And lastly, as for Jace's great actions, he just sucks as a counselor. Like, does he know what he's doing? No. Does he have any specific goal for what he's doing? No. His goals are literally, I want to stop the attacks that are happening by some random Zon group. That's his goal. Does he know anything about these groups? No. Does he know anything about Zon? Not really. But to do this and to fix all these goals and everything that he has, he's willing to wreck the entire freaking economy of Piltover. He's willing to separate Piltover and Zon and make them into two different countries. Or start a war. He's actually leaning way more towards the war side. And the only person who stopped that was, again, Mel. So, yeah. He just sucks as a counselor. And if Mel weren't breathing down his neck and telling him what to do and how to act as a counselor, I have no doubt that he would have just straight up gone for a war. Because that's entirely Jace's character. Like, he has no self-control or anything. Oh, and on top of that, if that weren't bad enough, there was one other counselor who actually really tried to help him and guide him. And what does that counselor get in return? He gets kicked off the council. Bye! Well done, Jace. Anyway, so that's just all of what Jace has done. That's not his actual character, but we're going to get into that now. Because, yeah, we still have a lot more to go to unpack in Jace's crappy character. So here is the most despicable person out of Arcane. First of all, he has no spine whatsoever. And yes, I am talking about Jace. He comes up... So one thing that you will notice if you're watching the show, and if you go back and rewatch the show, is he will come up with an idea. And whoever he is with, or whatever he is doing, someone else will come up with another idea or tell him to do something different. And 9 times out of 10, he will actually do whatever that other person says. So, like, Mel comes up to him and is like, we should weaponize your creations. And he's just like, okay. And his advisor suddenly comes up to him and is like, we shouldn't show off this new creation. And he's like, okay, I mean, my partner, who I really value, told me that we should do this, and this is who I should be supporting and whatever, but ignoring that, I'm just going to follow whatever this guy randomly tells me. Like, as much as I actually liked the advisor, the fact that Jace, no matter what situation, Jace could meet someone one time and suddenly he's acting entirely different was beyond me. He had no spine, no resolve, no goals, anything. He just did whatever anyone else told him to. Also, second, he clearly believes that he is worth every single bit of attention that everyone gives him. So, for example, he gets offered a seat on the council, and he admits that he doesn't know anything about being a counselor and that he just likes to invent things. But yet, when he's told, well, you're good at what you do, like, it'll be fine. Like, he's just like, okay, if you say I'll be good, like, I'll just do it. And, like, literally, he just expects everyone to do or think whatever he wants, like, without compromise. There are moments in the show where he actually, like, seems to have a goal and a motivation, and he's not just being, like, a flopping dead fish. And in those moments, everyone does or thinks or acts the way that Jace wants them to. So, for example, when it comes time for the council to discuss, should we divide Piltover and Zon and let Zon be a new nation, there is this whole montage of this council literally throwing themselves over the table, looking like they're about ready to freaking punch each other, like deck each other. And by the end of the scene, it is calm. They're all agreeing that Zon should become its own nation. How? Do we know? No, but it needed to happen, so it happened simply because Jace wanted it to. Another thing is, kicking the advisor off of council, again. And controlling the hex tech. And yeah, a lot of the times, Jace is just like, well, I'm going to do whatever I want, and sucks to be you guys, deal with it. So this actually brings me to my next point, and that is he considers himself and his pursuits above the law, and he just disregards all scientific ethics and academic procedures in pursuit of his own goals and ideas. And then he gets really butthurt and upset and confused about why he's in so much trouble all of the time. Really, Jace? It's almost like you're breaking all of the rules and all of the laws, and you're almost going to get arrested for it? What? Oh no! And lastly, he's clearly a bigot. Like, if he didn't have Victor, his partner from Zon, reining him in, there's no doubt that he would have gone to war. He just would have totally gone off the deep end, because he fully believes that people from Zon are a complete danger to society and that they're gross and disgusting and all of the 9 yards. Like, he just looks at people from Zon like they're the gum under his shoe, and it's only when they sort of have some sort of real relatability to him or his life that he actually cares a little bit. Like, he cares about Victor, sure. But when he meets Vi, he's like, oh, I'm gonna get you arrested, like, immediately. Needless to say, if someone had told me earlier that Jace was a villain, I would have totally believed them, because he acts like one. He disregards the rules and the laws. He is completely just blinded by his own emotions. And then, he just acts like people should worship his every single move. He is like, if somebody were like, oh, this is definitely the villain, he would have been the perfect idealized mustache twirling villain. But he's not, which is frustrating, because everything about his character, like his entire character design, if you know about character design, everything about Jace is designed to look like a hero. And that's frustrating to me. It's literally a TV show idealizing somebody who is a crappy human being and being like, here is this hero, worship him. And it's like, yeah, whatever. But we're gonna ignore that. We've got 2 more characters that we're gonna discuss for this part. First of all, Caitlin. I really loved Caitlin's character arc, and I feel like she didn't get as much screen time as she deserved. Her whole character arc is she goes into Zon as a really special, sheltered child, really, and she ends up coming out of the situation realizing that she is sheltered and that she doesn't know as much as she thought, and that she really did have a really, really good life. And she comes out wanting to be an advocate for change and wanting to support people. And that is a brilliant storyline to take. But ultimately, again, with the pacing, you're trying to fit a 30 episode TV show into 9 episodes. So what it felt like was we were getting just bits and pieces of this, but not nearly as deep as it needed to be. And so when it came down to the ultimate like bottom line where she's discussing the cycle of violence and we need to stop the cycle of violence from continuing, it just felt so empty. I mean, I was like sitting there, I was like, I agree, but at the same time, you know, what violence have we really seen? Because all we've seen here is people just running around each other and, you know, people having petty dramas with each other. We've been so focused on this plot over here that we entirely neglected what could have been a really amazing plot over here because we're just sticking everything together. So, yeah. I really liked the concept of her character and what her character arc was. It just felt half-baked and cut down and honestly neglected. I would have appreciated it more if they had cut back on several of the characters or had even just told the whole story through Caitlyn's point of view, because I could have dealt with that. You know, I would have been so intrigued to see everything that had gone down from Caitlyn's perspective as she navigates through the world and then tries to make this change. But it didn't happen, so you know how it is. And lastly, Victor, I already mentioned him. Victor is in my top 3 characters. It goes, I really like Vander. Vander and Victor are my tie for number 1. And then on top of that, Mel's like a close number 3. But I also like, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting their name. I'll think of it later. Here's the other character that I liked that I couldn't think of at the moment. So Victor, Vander, this character, and then of course Mel. So yeah, those are the 3 characters I liked. And Victor was so interesting because he comes from Zahn, but he is the one person who is not blatantly like, I'm evil, I'm going to control everything, or I'm going to fight everything with my bare fists. Like, he is not somebody who is like super aggressive and just looks like a cold stone killer. He is a scientist and he loves studying literature and loves learning things. And he is basically the nerd in the story. But again, like Caitlyn's, his arc felt only half complete. You don't really get to see Victor actually take an active role until like halfway through the series. And the last 3 episodes were the part where Victor's arc actually started to mean something, where he became like a legitimate character who had impact on the story. But again, it doesn't go very deep. It feels like Victor's story just became something that they could salvage from when they wanted to fill the series up with more action points rather than slow it down. So it feels like Victor just gets chopped up and shoved into the plot overall because they didn't want to actually slow anything down or risk having, you know, developing moments, building moments, because who likes building moments when we can just be fast paced and we can have 30 episodes shoved into 9? I swear, it's like they're trying to appeal to, you know, the TikTok 15-second to 1 minute mentality where you have no attention span beyond that. It's like, okay, but those are it for all of the characters. We are literally, I'm an hour into filming this video, and so this has got to speed up. So let's talk about world building and setting. First of all, why does Zahn even exist? And why does Piltover need it? Because when you're watching the series, they discuss, oh, there were these mines and we had these workers and stuff. And true, when you have the sort of like super rich and super poor complex going on, usually it's the super rich draining from the super poor. So the super poor provides workers like cleaning, janitorial, you know, food workers, agricultural, all that stuff. So they provide everything to the big city and they live in poverty. However, what I'm noticing is in the later part of the series, it seems like Piltover and Zahn are completely disconnected. It seems like they have nothing to do with each other. And so this idea of the council and everybody being so against Zahn and Piltover first being divided kind of blew my mind as like, you guys seem like two entirely different groups to begin with. Why are you angry about this? Why would you care if Zahn is its own nation anymore? Because it seems like it already is. And then another thing that I noticed was, how does any counselor become a counselor? Like, so they vote them on, yes, but what are their limits? And how do they get picked? And what are the other branches of government? As I was watching this, I just had tons and tons of questions that were never getting answered, especially about this, because it seemed like you could get appointed to being a counselor and then you'd be on the council for the rest of your life, however long that life was. So all it took was getting voted on once, and then you were there for the rest of your life. And I just didn't see any other branches of government. We saw the enforcers, but like nothing else. And you can't just run a government with a council and enforcers. So that was struggling. Also, another thing that I noticed was, what does Piltover do? So Zahn obviously is producing drugs. Thanks, Zahn. But Piltover is named the City of Progress, and I'm guessing they produce gadgets. But is that it? Because like in the series, as they're talking about this, and they're talking about the consequences of Jace's actions, they're discussing, oh, our gates and our ports are closing because of things that you're doing. But why does that even matter? Because we've never really discussed what Piltover imports or exports. Like, the whole setting of this reads like a middle schooler who discovered what epic fantasy was and then tried to recreate it, but didn't really know how. Because if you're going to discuss ports and stuff like that, you should already be discussing imports and exports. Like, you got to get nitty and gritty with it. But that just didn't happen. And then next, why does Zahn actually want to be its own independent nation? So when you're watching the TV show, it's like, we want to be our own independent nation because we want to have the wealth that Piltover has and we want to be equals. But by the end of the series, it seems like they already have quite a bit of wealth and everything, and they're still connected with Piltover. So it's like, why do they want to be an independent nation? Do they even really want to be an independent nation? Because again, by the end of the series, it seems like nobody really even cares. And this was one thing that I actually really struggled with the series. How does no one know what's going on in Zahn? So like, they're connected with a bridge. They're in a river. They're connected, right? But how does no one know? It's this huge thing where it's revealed in Caitlyn's arc, and it's revealed through the advisor, Heimerdinger. I think that's his name. It's revealed that everything that's going on in Zahn is like super bad, and it's clearly like way out of what people thought. And at the time, the council is like, well, our enforcer guy just didn't tell us. But at the same time, where are the journalists? Where are transfer people like Victor, who lived in Zahn but then moved over to Piltover? Where are the charities, the advocates, the politicians? You mean to tell me that there is not a single group of people from Zahn who have taken up any of these positions? You mean to tell me that there is no one? Because the only other excuse that you can give me is those people don't exist in Zahn. But then you also show people like Vi who are really publicly outspoken and who are trying to make a difference. So, you know, you can't just be like, well, nobody ever knows, and that's why nothing ever changed. And then, yeah, it's entirely disconnected, and it doesn't make any sense. And then lastly, this is another big thing for me, especially, because it just showed, like there's obviously a lack in world building here and in setting, but this one just showed, like, obviously they did not care. And this was the prison part. So, as I said before, Caitlyn helps Vi break out of prison, and then they go on their merry way. But the part that I was really frustrated about was the prison in general. Because, of course, we talk about, you know, Vi in prison, and we discuss how that doesn't change her character at all. But I mean, you look at the prison, and It's literally all that you see is the outside, the cell, the cafeteria, and like the front desk. That's all you see. And if that's all you're building in this world for your prison, of course it's going to be like, well, Vi didn't really change. Nothing really happened to her. Because, yeah, there's nothing to change her. And the thing is, prisons have a really profound effect on people, regardless if you went to a good prison or a bad prison. Prison has a profound effect on someone's psyche and their personality and their idea of the.
Disgusted, I am revolted, I dedicate my entire life to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and this is the thanks I...
So to have this not built up or not set up right, it then becomes a problem for later in the series and the show whenever Vi wants to use the prison as an excuse for anything. So when she goes to confront Echo, she's like, I was in prison this long. How can we feel her remorse or her awkward, like almost like guilt, shame? Like, how can we feel that for her if we don't know what this prison is actually like? How can we see her go to Jace and be like, you just lock people up without ever thinking about what it actually does to anyone? How can we feel that justification in that anger if we don't know what prison ever does? Like, they took something that could have been a really important part of the series and had a really profound message for someone, and they just cut it all. It didn't matter. It was distracting. It's not cool. It's too heavy world building. Goodbye. Like I said, the pacing in the story killed it, because this could have been a really impactful, important point of the story, and it just wasn't. If you guys want a really good example of what I'm talking about, go watch Banana Fish, the animated show. That show actually discusses the impacts of prison well, and I love Banana Fish. Anyway, so now we're getting to the end of this, and this is going to be me speed running these last 2 points, which are all of the plot holes that I found and the ending. And for the plot holes, I'm not going to go into depth about them. I'm just going to list them off where I saw them and read them off. You can think about things if you want, but the one thing that I do want to mention is if a show is well-rounded and if it was built well, it will not have this many plot holes and these questions that never get answered. Ideally, even the best of shows will only have maybe 1 or 2, because that shows consistency on the writing part and that shows good world building and good progress. If you're having more than 5, there's some problems. So anyway, let's get it right into it. I'm going to put a little counter right up here so that way you can count how many plot holes there are. But yeah, I'm just going to read them off. So, why would Vi invite Powder to their biggest mission yet if everyone knows she has the tendency to be clumsy? Why does everyone allow Powder to experiment with explosives if, again, she's clumsy? Why does it seem like everyone knows that stealing and doing crime above ground or the Piltover side of things is off limits? Why would Echo follow Jace and tell everyone about it, then leading to the entire premise of the show? Why does Vander not just turn over someone that their entire community doesn't like and claim they're the thief who ruined everything? Where does Silco get the funds or the personnel to build his drug empire that we see in the first few episodes? How does everyone know how to side with Silco against Vander if he's been in hiding for years? If Shimmer, the drug, produces such horrific results, who else would want to buy it or use it? The idea that it's such widespread when it's literally horrific makes no sense. Why would Silco take in Vander's daughter when he has literally abused a street kid throughout multiple episodes previously, shows no compassion, and already had a knife in hand, ready to kill? How does Victor know where to find Jace when Jace is about to... Why does Jace suddenly go so far as to declare it's their research when he's only talked to Victor twice at that point? Why has Caitlin not been arrested and taken off the task force when they've made it clear that she's been caught messing with crime scenes multiple times as an enforcer, which is a crime? How does Jinx know where the crystal is when Jace changed his mind at last moment about displaying his new technology and decided not to show the crystal to the public? How does Caitlin suddenly have the necessary documents needed to release Vi from prison if she turned down the position under Jace? How is Caitlin able to keep up with Vi under any circumstance through Zahn, especially when she's wearing heeled boots? Why does Caitlin's uniform have heeled boots if they're in a fairly modern and equal society when previously heeled boots were mandated as sexist practices? Where do all of the new gang lords suddenly come from when we've never heard or seen about any of them previously? Why is Vi so obsessed with beating Silco's second in command when she knows that the woman is just an obstacle? They fight each other as if they're mortal enemies, yet they have little to no history together to fuel such vengeance. Why does Jace go along with Vi's plan when they knew ahead of time the risks and rewards of shutting down Silco's criminal empire? And once he does, why doesn't he stick with it? He already knew the risks and rewards. Why does Jinx always seem to know where Vi is? How does Jinx abduct Caitlin, a literal enforcer, from her giant estate in Piltover, which is surrounded with enforcers? Why is Jinx setting up a psycho-like birthday party for her and her family when she's never shown character signs of being a literal psycho before? And also, why on earth would Silco or Caitlin be there when she seemed interested in discussing things with Vi? So those are all of the plot holes that I noticed when I was watching the show. There are probably a bunch more. I don't have the patience to go watch the show again and find all of them. But yeah, those were a bunch of them. Lastly, we're going to be talking about the ending. There are 4 theories about why it did happen the way it did, but it doesn't make sense, and I'm going to break down why none of those theories actually work. So first of all, we have theory number 1, the original plan. So at the end of the show, Jinx has taken Vi and Caitlin and Silco, and she has tied them all up and basically dragged them to a crazy birthday party, where she is obviously probably going to kill one of them. And she's going on and she's having this sort of evil monologue. And in the end, Silco is the one who dies, as I said previously. And after that, she decides that she's going to go and assassinate the council. So the theory with this one is that in the original plan, Silco's goals are to free Zahn from Piltover, which are correct, and make it into an independent nation. Therefore, in theory, if this were how things were going to go for the ending, instead of Jinx tying up Silco and everyone and being like, I'm gonna straight up gonna kill someone right now, in theory, how the ending would have happened is she would have turned herself in, and she would have given herself up to Piltover to be the sacrificial lamb. So her launching a rocket at the counselors doesn't make any sense when she already knows the conditions for what she would want to need, or what she would need to do in order to complete her goals. So the original plan theory of this was the whole plan the whole time along, we just didn't know it, and like they were just going to kill the counselors all along, doesn't make much sense because they could literally accomplish their same goals just in a different way. Next is Jinx's revenge for Silco. So in this concept, or in this theory of what happened, after Jinx shoots Silco, and Silco declares that he never would have given her over to the enforcers, Jinx then goes on to assassinate the council based on Silco's last words of, like, they can all burn, right? However, what's wrong with this is that the assassination takes place right after Silco's death, with no time to plan or prepare for it, meaning that Jinx had already created the weapon that she was going to use, and was intending to use it, especially given the fact that she had brought the crystal with her and had shown it off to everyone. But instead of using it on the council, I think it's more implied that she was going to use it on her family. Because after all, she had gathered them all together, all at once, and was clearly having a whole mental breakdown. Here's the next thing that I would think, is that Jinx is just having a mental breakdown. So this is probably one of the more realistic theories about why the ending ends the way it does. But if you watch the show, you'll notice that there's a difference between the ending and how Jinx usually interacts for most of the TV series. So for most of the TV series, Jinx is unhinged. She's angry. She's hallucinating. Everything kind of just seems off about her, right? Like she has a few screws and bolts loose up in the head. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the show, she is not having those moments anymore. She's calm. She's collected. She seems like she knows what she wants to do. So this idea of, well, she's just having a mental breakdown, and this is her just going nuts after killing her father figure yet again. Even though there's this idea that it could be that, it just doesn't make sense, because Jinx doesn't come off as, I'm so mentally unhinged from this. So we can't be like, well, it's Jinx's fault because she's crazy. No, it doesn't work like that. And lastly, the other theory for why this happens the way it does is pure hatred. So one of the things that I've noticed, I'm gonna put my computer down because we're to the end of this. So one of the things that I've noticed is Piltover and Zaun don't get along. They don't get along. And Zaun always seems to be shown as this nation that really just hates Piltover, like genuinely hates Piltover. And most of them would do anything that they could to get back at Piltover. However, Jinx never really seems to be connected to this. As I said before, she doesn't really have any personal connections to anything. But on top of that, she has no emotional connection to the fight either. She's mostly just there because Silco's there. And that's all she wants to be involved with. She just loves Silco and wants to be with Silco. So this idea that, Jinx is assassinating the council simply because she has a pure hatred for them, and she just wants all of them to die. Again, it doesn't fit any of the theories or any of the world building or anything that we know about this show. So literally, the ending makes no sense. We can't argue that it was the initial plan. We can't argue that it was Jinx trying to get revenge. We can't argue that it was Jinx having a mental breakdown. And we can't argue that she just hated them. And what this does is, first of all, it makes Jinx a plot device. And second of all, it insults all of the work that was put into her character. Because Jinx is one of the few people that really isn't a plot device. Like, she could be so easily, but she isn't, because she's so emotionally burdened and struggling that she can't be a plot device, because you can't have a really struggling character who's always messing things up and then have them be like the perfect thing that happens all the time. So it's just contradictory by nature, and it insults everything that was being done to build Jinx's character into what it was. But yeah, I've been recording this video for an hour and a half now. My voice feels like it's gonna go. Anyway, so that is this video. And it goes without saying that just because I didn't like it, or I thought Arcane was bad, doesn't mean that Arcane can't be liked. People can like bad things all the time. I mean, if there's anything that has proven that, yeah, if there's anything that it's proven that, we've seen it time and time again. So, like, if you like it and you enjoy it, don't hate it. Like, let yourself enjoy it. But also be conscious of things that go on around you in the media that you're consuming. Because it's so easy to be like, I love this show, so therefore it's a masterpiece. Because I see that all the time. That's actually what got me into the show in the first place, was I heard so many people being like, it's a masterpiece. It's so wonderful. I love it so much. Understand, there's a difference between being a masterpiece, like an objectively good piece of fiction, and then there's a difference between you liking it. So, like it, enjoy it, love it, be critical of it as well. Like, I'm always super critical about my books, and even there are book series that I've read and that I love to death, but I can objectively look at them and go, yeah, this is pretty crappy writing. So, like, be your best self, enjoy your life, enjoy everything that you have to offer, be aware. That's all I have to say. And also, if you want a review on like more details or more characters or anything like that, I'm not gonna review anything anymore about Arcane. This show burned me out emotionally. Like, I was not joking about saying Jace is one of the worst characters of 2022 and it's only January. Like, I could spend my whole life without watching another episode with Jace in it. So, if you're expecting more Arcane related content, no. It's gonna be this video and like why Arcane isn't dystopian. That's it. Those are my 2 Arcane videos. That is the only time that you will hear me actively discussing and reviewing or talking about Arcane as a whole. I will not be coming back to it. So don't hold your breath and don't ask for any more content, because I'm just going to tell you no ahead of time. But if you do want me to review or watch something else, by all means, feel free to leave something in the comments below. I'm always looking for new things to be watching or reviewing, so again, feel free, comments below. But otherwise, I'm going to leave this video here. It's been an hour and a half, and I'm losing my voice. And I've got class in like half an hour. So, I've got to go and prepare for everything that needs to happen in my life, and yeah. This video has to end. But otherwise, if you liked it and you enjoyed it, or if you agreed with it, feel free to comment, like, subscribe. Check out those links again in the description. Again, everything relating to my book, first free chapter, my author website, everything that you would need to know about amazing goodie wise is down there. So check that out. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye guys.